Nobody in that stadium expected what was about to happen. And I mean nobody. The cameras were pointed at one person. The lights were built for one story. And the entire world had already written the ending before the first point was even played. But sport has this brutal, beautiful habit of ripping up the script and throwing it in your face. And on this particular night, in front of millions of people watching around the world, a 20-year-old from Manila named Alex walked onto the most famous tennis court on earth and did something so impossible, so absurd that even the people who witnessed it in person still struggled to explain what they saw. The opponent standing across the net wasn't just a great tennis player. He was Rafael Nadal, 22 Grand Slam titles. A man who has broken the will of every generation of player that has ever dared step onto a court with him. A man who has come back from injuries that would have ended most careers, not music once, not twice, but multiple times. A man whose mental strength is so well documented that sports psychologists literally use his matches as case studies. That was who Alex was walking out to face. And the gap between them on paper wasn't just wide, it was a canyon. Alex had music scraped her way into this tournament. There was no fanfare when she arrived. Music, no documentary crew following her through the locker room. No sponsors lining up with checks. She had qualified barely, and most of the journalists covering the event had already moved on to more interesting storylines. She was a number next to a name on a bracket that nobody expected to get far. What those same journalists didn't know was that Alex had been preparing for this kind of invisibility her entire life. Growing up in Manila, she trained on courts that were cracked down the middle from years of heat and flooding. Music she practiced through typhoon season because you don't get to choose when you improve. She spent 6 months sleeping on a friend's couch in Europe because that was the only way she could afford to work with a coach who actually believed in her potential. She had been rejected from as across the continent because her ranking wasn't high enough. Her name wasn't recognizable enough. Her story wasn't marketable enough. And music, every single door that closed in her face she cataloged. She remembered every dismissal, every polite rejection email, music, every time a bigger name walked past her in a hallway without making eye contact. She wasn't bitter about any of it, she was building something, and the night the draw came out and her name appeared next to Nadal's, she didn't panic. She smiled, the same smile she'd been wearing for years. The kind that only makes sense to people who have been doubted so many times that they've stopped being surprised by it. The first set began the way most people expected. Nadal went to work immediately. He attacked her backhand, which is what he does to everyone because that relentless top spin to the weaker side has dismantled champions for 2 decades. He pulled her wide. He pushed her to the net. He tested her footwork with drop shots placed. Music so precisely, they looked like they had been calculated by a machine. And for the first 5 games it looked like the narrative was going to hold. Nadal was in control, the crowd was with him. Music, the Spanish flags were waving. The commentators were already framing the match as a respectful but predictable outcome. But here's the detail that nobody was paying attention to in those early games. And this is what makes the whole story so fascinating. Every time Nadal hit a winner, every time he forced an error, every time the point went against her, Alex Music didn't look down at her feet the way players do when the pressure gets to them. She looked at her strings, she adjusted her grip, and she smiled. Not a polite composure-maintaining smile, a knowing smile. The kind of smile that says, I see exactly what you're doing and I am already 3 steps ahead of your pattern. She was reading him, storing information in real time, processing his habits the way a chess player processes an opening. And Nadal, to his credit, didn't notice it at first because why would he? Music, he's faced the best players in the world for 20 years and none of them have broken him. Why would a 20-year-old from Manila be different? The answer came at 4 games, all in that first set. Deuce on Nadal's serve. One point that would go on to be shared so many times online, it became genuinely difficult to find the original footage. Nadal hit a drop shot. It was perfectly executed, short, with just enough backspin to die on the court surface. Music, it was the kind of shot designed to make an opponent concede the point before they even try to reach it. Because by the time you recognize what's happening, the ball is already past you. Music, Alex ran. And I don't mean she jogged forward hopping to get lucky. She ran like she had seen it coming before he even struck the ball. She reached it 2 in from the net and flicked a lob that went up into the air so high, so perfectly weighted that it hung there for what genuinely felt like an eternity. Nadal turned his back. Music, he stopped watching because it looked like the ball was going to land out. It didn't. It landed on the baseline and suddenly Nadal was scrambling. He got to it somehow and threw up a desperate smash. Alex was already there. She stepped inside the baseline, Music, took it on the rise and ripped a cross-court winner down the line that Nadal never even moved for. Music, the stadium went silent. Not quiet, not hushed, silent. The kind of silence you only get when something happens that a crowd of thousands of people cannot immediately process. And then slowly, the cameras caught something that the internet has been talking about ever since. Rafael Nadal, the most mentally composed player of his generation, looked over at his coaching box with an expression that nobody in professional tennis had ever seen on his face before. Pure confusion, Music. Not frustration, not anger, confusion. Like a man who had just watched something happen that didn't fit inside any framework he had for understanding the game he had spent his entire life mastering. The second set was where the comfortable story started to crack. Music, the media, the commentators, the people watching at home, they all had a backup narrative ready. Talented underdog pushes a legend before losing gracefully. Music, that's the story, that's the one that gets written and forgot within a week. But Alex refused to be that story. She won the second set, not because Nadal collapsed, music, not because he made errors. She won it by playing better tennis, smarter tennis, more precise tennis. In music, when the second set tie break arrived, when the match was genuinely on a knife's edge. When Alex was down 5 points to 4 with a match point against her, she did something that coaches are going to be using in instruction videos for the next 2 decades. She had noticed something about Nadal during the match, a habit, a tendency he had been relying on since he was a teenager, something so deeply ingrained in his game that it had become invisible. The way your own accent is invisible to you. When receiving big points, he cheated slightly to his forehand side. Just fractionally, music just enough. Alex saw it. And instead of playing safe, instead of pushing the ball deep and hopping for an error like every rational person watching would have advised her to do, she went directly at his feet. A dipping, spinning backhand return that skidded so low and so fast that Nadal had to reach like a catcher in baseball. His frame clipped the ball, it floated long, tie break over, second set music to Alex. The roar that came from the crowd in that moment was confused. Half of them didn't know who to cheer for. They had come expecting one kind of moment and were getting something entirely different, music something bigger. Nadal looked at the scoreboard. He shook his head, not in anger, not in frustration at himself, but in something closer to wonder. This man had beaten Novak Djokovic in 5-set finals. He had beaten Roger Federer at the peak of his powers. He had come back from a career-ending foot injury and won a Grand Slam. Music, nothing had ever broken him. And here was a 20-year-old who had crowdfunded her travel expenses on GoFundMe looking at him across the net with absolute certainty in her eyes, and he could feel it. He could feel that she had nothing to lose, and he had everything to protect. The third set wasn't a collapse, it was something more permanent than that. Music, Alex played as though every preparation session, every cracked court in Manila, music, every rejection letter, every early morning training call when her family had to stay up past midnight just to watch her matches had been building toward exactly this. She didn't make errors under pressure. She made better shots under pressure. Every time Nadal tried to shift the momentum, she shifted it back. Every time he went to a pattern that had worked against every other opponent on the planet, she had the answer. And when the final point ended, when the ball hit the back curtain and Nadal stood completely still, not chasing music, it because there was nowhere left to go, the stadium didn't cheer at first. It erupted. Grown adults who had never met each other were hugging in the stands. People were crying not because they were sad but because they had just watched something that sport, even with all its history and mythology, rarely delivers. A moment that felt genuinely impossible 30 seconds before it happened. Inside Nike's global headquarters in Oregon, executives were watching the same feed. They had a post-match campaign ready. It was built around Nadal. Classic, respectful, marketable, the kind of campaign that writes itself. The moment Alex raised her arms, the head of global tennis marketing picked up a phone and said 4 words, "Burn the old campaign." Within 20 minutes, Times Square was running a new graphic. Music, Alex's face, sweat still on her forehead, eyes wide and burning with one word underneath, unstoppable. No biography, no ranking, no introduction, just a statement. Nike placed her next to LeBron James, next to Cristiano Ronaldo, next to Serena Williams. They didn't wait for the dust music to settle. They didn't wait for the press cycle to catch up. They crowned her in real time. And the sports world, which had spent the entire match treating her like a footnote, had to reckon with what that meant. But the moment that nobody put in the highlight reel, the moment that might actually matter more than any of the music, tennis, came as Alex was walking off the court. She stopped. She turned around. She walked back to Nadal's bench. Music leaned down and said something in his ear. The microphones didn't catch it, but people worked on it, and music, what she said was not a taunt. She looked the king of clay directly in the eye and said, "Thank you for teaching me how to never give up." Nadal froze for the second time that evening. Then he pulled her into a hug that lasted 10 full seconds. 10 seconds that felt like a torch being passed between 2 different eras of the sport. And when they separated, Nadal said something back. Lip readers got that one too. "You're not the future, you're the present." The reactions came fast and overwhelming. Twitter crashed for 12 minutes. John McEnroe went on live television and said he had watched tennis for 50 years and had never seen a power shift happen in a single night until tonight. A former world #1 who asked not to be named texted a reporter 2 words, "She's different." In the locker room as Alex music, Ice walked in still trembling from the effort of it all. Every player stopped what they were doing not because they were required to, because they felt the shift in the room the same way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. The veterans nodded. The younger players stared. And one Grand Slam champion, a woman who had beat almost everyone in that draw herself, walked music directly up to Alex and said, "The pressure is yours now, don't drop it." Pressure. If only she knew. Alex had been living under pressure since she was 10 years old, practicing through typhoon rain on a cracked court with net posts that wobbled in the wind. She had felt the pressure of knowing her family was watching at 3:00 in the morning their time, not wanting to miss a single match. She had felt the pressure of knowing that one bad tournament could end her season because there was no financial safety net, music, no academy backing her, no wealthy patron writing checks. The doubters after the match did what doubters always do. They found angles. Music, they said Nadal was injured. They said he was past his prime. They said it was an anomaly, a one-night thing, a number that wouldn't repeat. Music, they clung to every explanation except the obvious one, which was that Alex was just better that night, better prepared, better focused, music, and in possession of something that no ranking or age bracket can quantify. The absolute refusal to accept that a ceiling exists. And then, as the confetti was still falling, as Nike's campaign was going live to a billion screens, as press conference journalists were writing their openers, Alex's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She opened it. Her face went pale mid-sentence. The reporter in front of her noticed immediately and asked if she was okay. She didn't answer because the message wasn't a congratulations. It wasn't a brand partnership inquiry. It was an invitation, a private match. No cameras, no prize money, no rankings, points, music, just tennis. And the opponent named in that message hadn't played a professional match in 3 years, a name that had simply disappeared from the sport at its peak. No injury, no scandal, no announcement, just gone. One morning the tennis world woke up and that player wasn't in the draw anymore. They were music, just gone. And the message to Alex ended with 3 words that made her hand shake against the glass of her phone. Are you ready? She put the phone face down on the table. The press conference ended early. She didn't answer another question. She grabbed her bag, walked past her agent without making eye contact, and locked the locker room door behind her. She read the message again, and then she did something nobody would have expected. She deleted it, but she had already memorized every word. That night, music, the hotel room was too quiet for sleep. The trophy sat on the mini bar like it belonged to music, someone else. Her phone buzzed again, this time not a text, a photo. Grainy black and white security camera footage. A figure standing alone on a tennis court at 3:00 in the morning. The court in the photo was the one in Manila where Alex had trained as a junior. The one nobody outside of her childhood knew about. The figure was wearing a hoodie, but the stance was unmistakable. Music, racket held low, weight on the back foot. She called the only person she trusted completely, Lo Ben, her childhood coach, an old man who still trains kids on that same cracked court in Manila. It was 4:00 in the morning there. He picked up on the first ring. Before she could explain why she was calling music, he said 8 words that stopped her breath. You saw it too. Alex couldn't speak. Lolo Ben was quiet for a long time after that, and then he told her a story he had never told anyone. 30 years ago, he had trained another prodigy. Same footwork, same fire, the same terrifying ability to read an opponent in real time that Alex had. That player had vanished the night before their first Grand Slam final. No goodbye, no explanation, just a handwritten note left in the locker room that said 5 words. The game is not what you think. Lolo Ben had always assumed something terrible had happened to them. But now, looking at that photo Alex had sent him, he wasn't sure anymore. Music, Alex hung up. She looked at the image again. The figure in the hoodie was holding something up. A sign handwritten. Music, one sentence that she could barely read through the grain of the image. The real championship has no cameras. Outside her hotel window, music, a car engine started, then stopped, then started again. She pulled back the curtain. The street below was empty, but sitting perfectly on the sidewalk directly beneath her window was a single tennis ball, brand new, unmarked, placed on its side like it had been put there deliberately. Alex Music stood at that window for a long time. The city was quiet around her. The trophy was behind her. Nike's campaign was running on screens across the world. Every sports channel on the planet was replaying her final point against Nadal in slow motion. And none of that mattered right now because somewhere in this city, someone who was supposed to be retired was lacing up their shoes for the first time in 1,000 days. And Alex had a choice to make. Stay in the light, take the endorsement calls in the morning, do the talk shows, be the face that Nike just told a billion people she was, or walk into the dark and find out why the greatest player anyone ever saw just quietly disappeared from a sport they were born to play. Music, the new face of tennis, had been crowned tonight. The whole world had seen it happen. But the real match, the one with no cameras, no crowd, no rankings, no history to protect, that match hadn't started yet. And somewhere in Manila, Lolo Ben sat alone on a cracked court at 4 in the morning, music, looking at a note he had kept in his wallet for 30 years. And for the first time he understood what it meant.